Hi.
Good afternoon, Anton. How are you doing?
I'm very good. It's evening here, so I'll say
Yes.
good evening and good afternoon. But yes, New South Wales, Australia. Sydney's about an hour and a half away. That's if anybody's listening in and watching in and wondering where I am in Australia, that's a good idea of where we are. Not too far from Sydney.
That's awesome. And obviously, you've got UK accent. So, where are you from originally?
I'm actually from Northamptonshire. Um, but I've lived in a few places around the world. Lived in New York for a little while, working over there. I lived in London. I'm now obviously living in New South Wales, Australia. So, as a former professional actor, my accent is British, not limited
Regional.
to not regional
Yeah.
anymore.
Wow.
So born and bred Northamptonshire, but don't sound like I'm Northamptonshire anymore.
Yeah. Totally get you.
Yeah,
I don't realise I've got an accent, but I have.
my wife says I'm
Nottingham.
more Australian now than when I first came here, and we were actually talking last night, and just a general subject, and she said, "God, you're sounding so bloody Australian." So
Yeah, I'm picking it up. You can. Um, I think
no,
whenever you're in an area and you get people round in an accent, you do automatically pick it up. And some are stronger than others as well, aren't they?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So yeah, it's like if you go away with Americans, like, wow, you change
Yeah.
your words and you
Mm.
definitely pick up
Look,
some of
I
the
still
accent there.
call I still call the pavement the sidewalk. I still refer to a torch as a flashlight. My car
Wow.
is a hood and a trunk. And even my wife says, "No, it's not a hood. It's not a trunk. It's a bonnet." That's my boot.
I love it. Yeah.
Mm.
But a lot of the words like from the US sort of come into our English language, don't
Oh,
they, as well? And things just change as time moves on. But thank you so much for being a guest.
yeah.
So I always start with a question. So where did you first realise that something else was out there? You first like insight into the paranormal, first time you questioned things.
Look, I've pretty much always been a questioner. Um, my first experiences, I would say, I was probably in my pre-teens, 8 or 9 years old, and I started. I'm not a medium. I don't pretend to be a medium or clairvoyant or anything like that. I'm fortunate in the fact that sometimes I can pick up on things, and I don't control it. There are very good mediums out there who know what to look for, know how to put things across. I don't. I just hear them or see them, and that's
Wow.
it. That's how it happens. And in the semi-professional world of an investigation, working on quite a few investigations. Excuse me, I had a cold last week and it's still on the
Oh,
chest.
shame.
Um, on a few investigations, I've worked with the mediums, and I've said, for some reason, I'm picturing this, or I'm hearing this,
Wow.
and they've said, well, you're a medium, and I've said, no, Jane, I'm not a medium. I can't control. I don't do what you do. I just hear it, or I just see it, and also, very lucky in a sense because on a number of occasions, and I say lucky, I've never backed any of these premonitions. But, you know, I remember one instance, and I was living in London, and a friend said to me, "Oh, did you see the football last night?" And I said, "No, I didn't, but they won 3-1." And he said, "Well, you did see the football then?" I said, "No, I didn't." He said, "Well, how did you know they won 3-1?" I said, "I
Oh,
didn't."
wow.
He said, "Yes, they did. They won 3-1."
Oh, gosh.
Um, there was an incident with the Grand National. I know they still have the Grand National in the UK.
Yeah.
I was, excuse me, I was driving into Cambridge, and I said, I must pick Amberley House. And I was
Yeah.
driving my
Important.
mother on a day trip, and I said to her, I said, "I've got to get to a bookies in Cambridge, and I've got to put a bet on Amberley House." And she said, "Why?" And I said, "Because Amberley House was trained by Ginger McCain, who was the
Red Rum, yeah.
Yeah. And I said,
I like horse racing. It's terrible. Yeah.
I said last night, in my head, the words Amberley and Ginger.
Wow.
And I said, at that time, they meant nothing, but I just heard on the radio Amberley House. And then I heard Ginger McCain.
But then the fact that you heard on the radio as well, like, you know, if it was you were in the car like another 10 minutes later, you wouldn't have heard it. And it seems that spirit puts things in your way as well. They put signs in the way and they will help you. So it won then, did it?
Yeah, it did. It did.
I think I remember it winning, yeah.
It did, and I didn't sadly get to a bookies until after the race.
Gosh, no.
And I walked into this betting shop just around the corner from. We were watching the race on a TV shop in Cambridge. You know, televisions. I can't remember what the shop was, Curry's or something. And I remember seeing, and I said, "Oh, just let's see who wins." You know, watch the race. And then walked around the corner. So I was destined not to put money on it, but I was also following a hint, if you know what I mean.
Wow. So in a way, spirit stopped you from making money out of that.
Yeah, that's fine.
It gave you the carrot. It pushed it in your face, going, "Oh look," you know, and then
the stick.
That's incredible.
Look, I've always said, look, my wife and I, we married in 2014, and she's Australian, and I came over here for the marriage, and we knew each other before, and it wasn't a sort of what do they call it? It wasn't an internet dating or anything like that. We actually met through Ghost Hunters Australia.
Oh, wow.
And we started conversing, and after a while we got very friendly. I then went into hospital for a third operation. And at the time, I was going through absolute hell. My mother had just died. I couldn't go out and work. I was very ill, all sorts of things going on.
Yeah.
Now, here's the thing. I said, when my mother died, and I felt as if I was on my own, literally.
I get that. I'm in that. I'm in that scenario now. It's horrible.
I strongly believe, I can't prove this, but I strongly believe that my mother was up there and she said, I'm going to find someone who is going to be perfect for you. You're going to be perfect for them. They're going to be perfect for you. You've always had a subliminal passion for Australia. It was never an urge to go and live in Australia, but somewhere along there, as kids, hello.
Hello.
A big fella.
Hello.
Really?
It just got up because I was thinking of you, because as you mentioned your story, I can relate because I lost mum and dad. And my dad went into a home and I had to rehome his boxer. And a person who helped me, because it was hard to get dogs rescued, person who helped me so much at this dog rescue place. She took him on and stuff, and they looked after him even though he was 13 and ill, which was incredible. So years on, lockdown happens. I knew I could offer a dog a home for. It seemed it's going to be for 2 months at the time. We didn't know what was going on, did we? But I could see what was happening in Europe and China and everywhere that 2 months, and there's still lockdown and everything. So I thought, right. So I looked on the internet. Sheffield, who was there? The same rescue people who looked after mum and dad. So the girl who sorted it out is also a good friend. It was Saturday before lockdown on the Monday. So I put in my interest to a foster for a day, and him and the bloke were just in each corner growling at each other, basically. So he got dragged from there. He came here. My mate did a home check. She put the fence up for me so I could pass the home check, and that's it. And I
Yeah.
feel that my mum sent him to me.
And also the fact that being a boxer, that's, as you say, that was your dad's dog.
It's the same, yeah, it was the same rescue, and it was just, it really seemed, because it really broke my heart, sending a dog to rescue. I had a staff in, it just didn't work. So I do really believe that happens.
Yeah, look, and I think on a sort of spiritual sense, we kind of overestimate or maybe underestimate what is actually out there.
Definitely.
And I do believe that there is a realm where they move it. Whenever I explain death to somebody and I say to them, I said, look, don't think of them as being deceased. Think of them as just stepping into another room next door.
Yeah.
They can see you. You can't see them, but you can feel them. And when you need it most, you'll feel a touch. You'll feel a warm breeze, or you'll feel something inside, and you know they're listening or that they're with you.
Yeah, but even if you can't pick things up like that, you get feathers, you get robins appear, but it's like, I had a cat die. That night, I had a butterfly in the back window of the house. I have never, to this day, since having the house since 1999, had a butterfly in my house. And that window's not even open, so you have to go with this as a message from spirit, really.
They're sending something to say, I can't physically hold you at your most emotional time. I can't physically talk to you, but spiritually, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to feel, then I will let you know that way. And I think with my mum, and also my dear wife's father, he died 6 months after we were married.
Oh, wow.
And so we kind of say between us that they're both, excuse me, they're both watching, they're both guiding and showing us, how we can learn about each other and how we can move on.
Wow.
And it's perfect, because so long as we trust that, and so long as we trust that they are watching, we don't feel that things will go wrong. Things will, you won't always see eye to eye, but we both have the faith that up there, they won't let us get to any point where we don't want to be with each other anymore, because they're both looking and saying, but this is the best for you.
Oh,
this is what you both need. So we both believe that. And there are so many strange things that have happened since that we relate all of these stories to that. So
yeah, that's right. It is incredible. My main thing is paranormal. I go out I go out on team events. I go out public events, private events. Private investigations. And shortly after my mum died, I went to a place in Leicester. And I was driving down the motorway. I just pop on the motorway, the M1, and that's it. A few junctions down, you're there. Well, I knew somebody was in the car next to me, and I knew it was my mum. I just knew it was. And she does make herself known in the car. It's her old car. And I never want to lose that car. And oh my gosh, it's going to be so bad. So you turn up at this event, which is a theatre. So the team are on the stage, welcome everybody, health and safety. There's a medium there. He says to me, oh, you've got a lady sitting next door to you in the auditorium. Yeah, it's my mum. He said, there's a bloke in a wheelchair behind you. And I said, well, I don't know who that is. And afterwards I realised it was my dad. The last 2 months of his life he was in a wheelchair. But it's not what you think of him, because he was always so active, and even when he was 80 he was walking miles. He used to walk all the time. And they said, you've got a staffy, a brindle staffy. And while he's alive. Yeah, okay. And, that's what he got. And then we said something called Mr. Bones. Mr. Bones was a dog I knew who my staffy had met. And it got cancer. And he recovered.
Yeah.
And I kind of knew what that meant. To me, it meant that something was wrong with my dog. And as it turns out, he started having fits. And yeah, he was diagnosed with brain cancer. What is it? Fits. You know, he had fits and things. But it was weird because they warned me in a way.
Yeah.
And I knew what they meant. I knew what they were saying, basically, just to watch Charlie, you know. So the first bit of a sign, I took him to the vets, you know, because I'd been warned. And it is incredible.
We often call it things like gut instinct or trust your inner voice.
Yes.
And I think that's what it is. It's not necessarily our voice. It's the voice of a spirit telling us.
Yes. Yeah, that's right.
And, you know, you try to relate those incidents to the person closest to you. And when you do that, everything starts to make sense. This is why it happened. Because if you just said, Derek Akora, bless him, he had Sam.
He was a wonderful medium, no matter what anybody says, you know, and we all know what happened. And TV show, and that's that. Entertainment.
I think what they did on the show wasn't necessarily respectful to him. I get why they did it, because I think contractually Derek had said he had other offers and wanted to pursue them.
Right.
And I think Carl Beattie had said, but you're contracted to us. So there was a contract wrangle.
Yeah.
And in order to sort the situation out for the benefit of the show, they had to make Derek appear as if it was some element of fakery.
Yeah.
And I think it was disrespectful to do that.
It was totally, because, it seems like the whole thing is scripted or something like that. We don't know, obviously, but you know, we won't go too much into. I know people who've worked on the show. I'm friends with people who have connections with it, you know. But we'll get off that subject. But it's. It got me into paranormal. Put it that way.
Not with regard to any specific show, more with regard to how people behave. It's such a minefield. The whole paranormal world is such a minefield.
It's terrible, yeah.
And it's very, very competitive. It's almost nobody's put this, or I think Harry Houdini did, has put this bounty out there for someone to produce actual 100% proof.
Yeah, that's it.
And so everybody is clamoring for their 15 minutes of, like Andy Warhol said, their 15 minutes of fame to produce something which is unquestionable. But the moment you produce something, you're faking it because it comes naturally. The environment comes naturally. If you see a ghost in front of you, it's a natural occurrence. It's not something where someone gets a projector and says, here you go, I'm going to produce an image of a ghost and I want you to have your video camera and to be accidentally stumbling upon it. That is a clear element of fakery, and there is way too many people out there willing to do that for their 15 minutes of fame, and it doesn't do the field any good whatsoever.
And with AI as well. That is absolutely shocking.
Hugely different argument. As a former actor, I stand with them firmly. But I said to my wife last night, it won't change anything. Hollywood moguls have got far too much money, far too much power. They won't win, but God bless them. And
it's absolutely shocking for all the actors at the moment out there. Oh dear. Yeah.
You think that your face could be used on another actor and you can't do anything about it because you haven't, you're unaware of it. I mean, we watched Indiana Jones and not Last Crusade, the most recent one, Dial of Destiny.
Right, yeah.
and we watched that at the cinema a fortnight ago, and I saw the AI that they use to recreate a young Harrison Ford with an actor, stuntman running on the top of the train. I won't kill the story if you've not seen the film, but running on the top of the train, just as you imagined 40 years ago when they released the very first film.
Yeah.
And you couldn't see the join. You were looking at it and thinking,
yeah, you do, yeah.
This is Harrison Ford. They must have had this film in a wardrobe somewhere, and they've just discovered it and said, let's put this in the movie. They hadn't. They actually filmed it just last year, and parts of it were filmed here. But
Oh, wow.
because of AI, you don't see the join.
No, that's it.
It's very skilled, but we're kind of getting off topic. But yes,
Yeah, we always do. This is the thing. What happens with a podcast?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Yeah,
But
we
it is
talk about shopping in one, but hey, but
it is relevant because there are people out there. There is a Russian who has his own YouTube channel. And I watched a few of the videos that he's put out, and I thought, this is very clever. But then I thought, after watching them closely, that is absolutely impossible unless you have, there was one scene where he's on the top of a bunk in a crofter's cabin in the middle of nowhere. And he's lying on the top of the bunk with his video camera, peering out underneath the bedclothes of this fella as the man walks past.
Right.
And he's saying, I've got to be quiet because I've been disturbed by this crofter. Now, the crofter, it wasn't necessarily paranormal. What he was suggesting was that this crofter was responsible for a lot of murders.
Okay.
And I thought to myself, if this was genuine, you wouldn't put yourself in that much danger.
Right.
You certainly would not be. I mean, he was probably no more than, at one time, no more than about a foot away from the top of this guy's head.
Yeah.
You would not be sticking a video camera out bed sheets and watching it, not without the guy sensing that you're there.
Exactly. Oh my
And
gosh.
this guy's got actors in the corner of the room. He's got shotguns on a shelf. And I'm thinking, no, I don't care how much the golden nugget is. I am not putting myself in danger just for a bit of footage to suggest that this is a paranormal incident.
Yeah,
But
that's right.
And that's when you start questioning it. That's when you start saying, this is fakery.
Yeah.
And I think they do a huge disservice to genuine people out there who want to find out, who want to establish that something is going on that we don't know what it's about.
Yeah, it's shocking. Like, I tend to investigate. If I'm on a private, I go and do it. I do pick up things. I have been training to be a medium for 8 years. I am picking more and more up. Tonight I'm out with 4 people, including myself, who pick things up. 2 are really good mediums. One's just won the Derek Akora Award for New Mediums last year, so I'm out with her. And we get together and the energy can be intense and we can be affected by spirit. Now, I don't always have a camera running because I want to experience things. So I will write out what has occurred to me. And then people go, oh, you can't be an investigator, you didn't video it. Oh, now I'm doing this for my personal journey. Okay, if you've got footage of this happening, then, oh, you're acting. You know, so you can't win. And it's all about your personal journey, isn't it?
Yeah. I've seen so many things in the paranormal field that I have absolutely no explanation for. Somebody will come along at one point and say, no, but here's the answer. Good. I'll accept it. If it's genuinely given, I'll accept it. I excuse me. Don't know if it was last week, but there was an occasion. We were working at the Talbot Hotel, infamous through Mary Queen of Scots and what have you.
Yeah, in the UK.
In the UK, yeah.
Oh, okay. I know a team who's got that next year. Yeah, brilliant.
A beautiful place.
Yeah.
I will say, hand on heart, I don't believe it's Mary.
Okay.
Only because Mary was never there. The hotel wasn't built in her period.
Right.
It was built about 70 years after she lost her head. And I'm being a bit glib there, but yeah.
Well, yeah.
70 years after her passing. And I know the history of the place inside out. I know that the stone from Fotheringhay Castle was used right across the whole area. Parts of it were used for Barnwell Manor, parts of it were used for the village of Barnwell, parts of the castle were used for the Talbot Hotel. The staircase, no, because the staircase is Jacobean.
Right.
Now, that would be Mary's son, who didn't take the throne until 1605, long after she passed away. But the staircase is Jacobean. So the rumours of her ring mark being in the staircase have absolutely no grounding at all.
Yeah.
But having said that, by Christ, we've had some very unnerving nights there.
Yeah.
We were working, a friend of mine worked with Sky Television and he wanted to do a sort of promotion. And he said to me, look, you do investigations. Can we do one at the Talbot? And I said, well, I'll organise it. Excuse me. And we were at the Talbot Hotel. It was, I think it was about August in 2003, because we followed it up a year later. I'll explain that in a second. But in 2003, we were in the Mary Queen of Scots suite, which is right at the very top. And if I remember, you've got the Mary Queen of Scots suite and another suite. I can't remember the name of that. And we were in the Mary Queen of Scots suite. We had monitors, 4 monitors, and cameras in, if you know the Talbot Hotel, the Whitwell suite, which is the floor below.
I haven't been, but.
Oh, okay. Well, when you do go, if you do go, you'll say, oh, I remember these now. I think Anton told me some time ago. The Whitwell suite below, and we had cameras on the stairwell. We had cameras in probably about 8 or 10 cameras, I think it was. And we used this place as the hub, the Mary Queen of Scots suite. Excuse me. And we sat patiently for probably about 4 hours with nothing happening, nothing at all. And you know, when you see a TV show and nothing happens and you think that's more genuine than,
correct, yeah.
Kicking off, because nothing kicks off. It doesn't, all go belly up and everything happens in the way television presents. But so there we were for about 4.5 hours. And it was getting towards 2:15 in the morning. And I said, you know what, I'm really tired and I want a drink to wake me up. So does anybody else want a drink? We had facilities in the room to make tea and coffee. I turned on the kettle. All the monitors, all the sound equipment, everything went dark. I said, oh, bugger, I think I've probably blown the hotel fuse.
Yeah, that's it.
So I went down to see the night porter, a fella called John, passed away now, but lovely, lovely fella, Scottish fella. And I said, John, all the power's gone in the upstairs, in the in the Mary Queen of Scots suite. It can't have done. Well, it has. So he went to the board and he looked at the electricity board and he said, let me show you this. This bank here controls the front of the hotel. This bank here controls the back of the hotel. Neither board had blown fuses.
Wow.
So I said, well, I don't know, John. All I know is the lights had gone out. Excuse me. So everything was all back to normal by the time I walked back up to the Mary Queen of Scots, and kettle ready, everybody's having a cup of tea. And I said, everything's okay. They said, as soon as you walk down the stairs, it all came back on again. Okay, that's interesting. Now, because of the circuit boards in the hotel, they have to be manually flipped back on, right? You can't, they don't just wait 30 seconds and then regenerate.
No, of course I don't. No, I've got a switch you have to put on, a trip.
So how that happened, I can't explain, but it happened, and I won't pretend it was paranormal. I won't pretend it was anything other than, at the time, I just thought, well, it's odd.
Yeah, that's right.
Went back into the room, and everybody's all sort of relaxed. Monitors are all back on again. Then all of a sudden, we heard, about 30 seconds apart, 2 enormous bangs. So bad that the whole room shook.
Wow.
We couldn't explain it. And I said, trying to think laterally, and I said,
yeah,
I don't know, but has a lorry crashed into the building? Because it had a rumble. And I'll make the noise, but multi-times.
And the room shaking as well.
And then 30 seconds later, a second one.
Gosh.
And so Simon was the guy working with Sky, and I said, we better go and check because something's happened here.
Yeah.
We were expecting to find the front wall of the hotel and debris and a lorry and what have you.
Yeah.
So went down the 2 flights of stairs to the reception. There's John. And I said, excuse me, I said, John, what the heck happened? And he said, what do you mean? I said, John, you must have heard that. Heard what? I said, we had 2 enormous bangs in the room. No, nothing's happened. Have you looked everywhere? Okay, we'll go and have a look. So Simon and I started going through the front of the hotel. We went to the bar downstairs, and there was a couple of, very drunk women still drinking at 2 in the morning. Now 3 of them. And they were at a wedding that day, and they were just sitting there drinking till the early hours. And we said to them, did you hear the bang? And they said, no, nothing here. We're just minding our own business, having a drink. So then we went up to the next floor, went into the Whitwell suite. Now, oak tables are very heavy, as you know.
Yeah, definitely.
When they're an oak table that is capable of seating 18 people,
gee,
that's one heck of an oak table. There were definitely 2 tables, and they were apart. When we first went into the hotel, they were apart, one on one end of the room, one on the other end of the room. Mm-hmm. We got in, both tables were upside down.
Gosh, wow.
Simon and I couldn't lift them, right? We had to go back and ask John, and John said, we can't lift them. He says, I'm no bigger than you are. He said, the 3 of us will not lift those tables. Underneath the tables were the tablecloth.
Wow.
Absolutely not rumpled, crumpled or anything, just as if these tables had been flipped 180 and landed down.
Wow,
right?
That's weird.
So we got a couple of people from our crew, and I said, we need to get these tables back up. We lifted the tables eventually. Placemats, cutlery, everything. All underneath this table. Not in a pile, all as if they were assembled, but just upside down. And I said, well, that must be the sound we heard, the 2 tables flipping. But there was only 2 women in the bar. Yeah.
Gosh,
there was only 2 women in the bar. They were very drunk. They couldn't have. If John had have come through and said to these two ladies, come on, we'll have a crack. There's a team of investigators upstairs. Let's do something. I am still at odds as to how he did it, because John, he was 5'9". He had I would have said a 26-inch waist. Now I'm a 38-inch waist. He's a 26-inch waist. So can you imagine he's very thin?
Yeah.
He was in his 60s then. There's no way he could have lifted it, even with the help of these two ladies. When he came up with Simon and I to initially try and move, we couldn't do it. That's three of us, and Simon and I were a bit more well-built than he was. We couldn't do it. So that left only the people in the room. Well, we know we didn't leave the room, not in any number. So these tables had flipped 180, cutlery, placemat, tablecloth, all underneath them. I have absolutely no explanation as to how that happened. Don't know.
That's just incredible. Yeah, it wouldn't happen. And like, nobody is going to spend the time and put placemats in a position on the floor. No, it wouldn't happen. You know,
not in that time anyway.
It's not logical to even want to do that. You wouldn't.
No. So I can't explain that. I'm happy if someone came up to me and said, I know how it's done. It's done this way. It's done with a hoist and blah, blah, blah. I would still say, you show me how you can do that in such a short space of time, because you wouldn't be able to do it.
It's got to be really fast, doesn't it? You can't. Because, gravity's going to move it out of shape. You know,
you've also got to take the hoist away from the room. You've also got to take all the crew who did it away from the room. Impossible.
No,
so I can only say, yeah. Well, a year later, because of that event, the local newspaper asked me and said, great story. We're going to send a couple of reporters from our newspaper. Would you take them on an investigation? Yeah, took them on an investigation. And similar fashion, we looked around and checked all the kitchen. So we had a good investigation. In the Whitwell suite, one of the journalists, and they're independent, they had nothing to do with us other than they were guests. One of the journalists said, I just saw something run across the back of the room. So I said, okay, and I got and it was just a normal digital camera at the time, and I just clicked off a few rounds, and I didn't see anything other than an orb. And I said, oh, look, there's a bright orb here, nothing untoward. I said, look, I'll have a closer look tomorrow, and if I see anything, I'll send it through to you. Now, we always do a baseline check when we do an investigation, as you should do. The curtains in the Whitwell suite were velvet curtains, so light getting through, almost impossible.
Yeah.
No street lights outside. The curtains were drawn. Excuse me, it's oak paneling. Oak paneling doesn't necessarily have a reflective surface.
No.
There were no paintings in the Whitwell suite on the wall where I don't know, I might be able to send the picture to you. And at the very time this journalist said, and I clicked off a few photographs, I enlarged the picture about 20 times, and this is the image I got. Now, I can send it through Messenger.
Right, I'll see.
It may be only in small frame. I don't know if you can.
Yeah.
You may not even put it on here, but
yeah, I will add it afterwards, because
yeah.
I may actually go wrong if I try and do anything.
That's all right. Anyway,
incredible, yeah, I can see it.
The image I got.
Interesting.
I don't want to say too much. I hope you've got a good size of the picture there.
Yes, yeah, it's great.
You can see something white on a dark oak panel.
Definitely.
It could be pareidolia. I don't
Yeah.
think so, because there was no external light sources. I didn't use a flash on the camera, so it's not the flash bouncing.
That's the quick one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
I see something in there, and every person including Kieran O'Keefe,
Yes,
has looked at this image and said, Kieran O'Keefe, quote, "I have absolutely no explanation."
brilliant.
Every other person has said what they saw or see in that image. Now, I don't want to say too much if people want to guess what they think.
I will actually edit it in afterwards or during.
Yeah. But all I can say is I see a person. Can we mute a second or stop a second, pause, and I can tell you what I see?
I don't know how.
Oh, okay, no worries. Leave it then. Okay, I see. I'm going to say it. I see an Elizabethan lady with her hair swept back, as they did, just like Queen Elizabeth.
Wow.
And a high forehead. You see a ruff around the neck. And you also see what looks like a chain of office around the neck. Most people have seen that. Others have said it looks like a woman holding a baby. But everybody has said they see a woman in the picture.
That's incredible, isn't it?
How that image came about, I have no idea, because as I say, there was no flash. I didn't use a flash. That is an oak panel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There is no paintings on the wall in any opposing side of the room.
Reflect on it, yeah.
Yeah. And yet here we have what to me looks like an Elizabethan lady. When you put that together with the journalist saying, I saw someone move across the room.
Exactly.
You've got to be asking a question. Again, I'm not willing to go 100% and say, that's a ghost.
Yeah.
I'm putting it out there and saying, I don't have any answers to it.
It's all about probability and what backs something up, isn't it?
Yeah.
And, you know, like, I use cat balls. Okay. Everyone's going, oh, they're rubbish, whatever. Okay. So you go, can you light it up? It lights up. Can you stop it? It stops. And you do this countless times and it keeps doing this.
Yeah.
It's not always your voice vibration. There's no vibration anywhere in the room. And it's all about probability, isn't it? Like,
absolutely.
You know, you think, well, this has happened. It's happened straight away. Let's do it again. And it is annoying that you sort of ask, like, if something is happening, can you do that again? And I always apologize because they say, like, spirit uses energy and everything, and it must take them. We don't know how much effort it is for them to do something, but you know, if you ask and you get, then what else is that? You know.
Yeah, there's, and I also couple it with the idea that if you took it as a singular event, you could probably say, like the cat ball going off, you could probably say, yes, you know, it's voice activated, or it's, you know, the vibration of your tone, whatever. You could come up with a number of things, but if the cat ball is going off and your necropolis is going off as well with a name, and you can research the name, and you know let's say the laser grid is showing an image in there. You've got a number of things. It's far harder to question a number of things than a singular event. You know, so excuse me. That's what I try and do in any investigation, is don't just look at one thing and say, oh, that's definitely it. You know, you can't. You have to look at it as a multitude of things and say, you know, your K2 is going blip, 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 blip. but
Yeah.
nothing else is happening.
Yeah, check the electrics again because you've already checked once, and just to the nth degree over time. Yeah, why is it doing it? Is it actually a person who's influencing that?
Yeah.
You can find like somebody walks towards it, it will go off. Somebody walks away. They haven't got electrical equipment on them.
I have theories about the talking board, or Ouija, as a lot of people like to call it. I call it the talking board because I think
that's what it is, isn't it? In a way.
Yeah.
Without the Hollywood hype, and yeah.
It was a game invented in the 19th century, part of the Victorian period of the Fox sisters. I can tell you, but it was done as a parlour game, and it just happened to take on a bit more of a slant. Now, at face value, you look at the talking board and you get information. When we ever did the talking board, the first thing I always said was, if anything personal comes through, I'm going to stop it. Because it's not the environment for personal. And I don't want anybody to go away from here with an experience thinking, oh, that was about me. And it becomes dangerous. Yeah. So the talking board, I always prefaced it with a lot of things. And then I said, if you have where people say the glass has moved and there's been nobody there, or how could I have this bit of information when they weren't touching the glass? And I said, or I would say, that's an entirely different part of the paranormal genre. Have you considered telekinesis? That the person who's standing at the far side of the room can still influence the board and you because you're their friend, synchronicity, you're on the same wavelength as them, you're thinking about something and they could be sending you a subliminal message.
Yeah.
That's how they know. And the amount of people that look and think, never really thought about it like that. Mm-hmm. But it's possible. And if there's, if Sherlock Holmes, and he said, at first you must rule out the impossible before you can find the improbable.
Yeah.
And don't always believe and take everything at face value. The glass may have moved on its own because there could be a bit of dampness under the glass. There could be a bit of, friction on the board, which is holding it, which is relaxed. The water has interacted with the surface.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
There's lots of things. But if you have asked for the glass to move on its own in accordance with a number of letters, that's more than one thing. That's a number of things going on. And if it does, in accordance with what you've asked, if it does that, I don't have an explanation for that.
Yeah, that's right. Now, there was an incident at Derby Jail.
Yes.
Now, Rich, I don't know if you saw the glass moving on the table.
I heard about it.
Okay, so I've seen footage. I was there a week after, and I actually watched the CCTV of it. I think I've even put it out on my page. So basically, he was having a chat, and he had a glass of whiskey. And while he was having a chat, he kept getting a drink. There you go. The whiskey glass was nearly empty. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he put it down again. It moved, slid off the table. Straight away, he checked to see if the table was wet. It wasn't.
Yeah.
Okay. My theory is that it's one of his family members thinking that he's being recorded. This is empty. He keeps going for it. Stop it from happening.
Yeah.
My theory.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. It's
I told him that as well. And, there's no logical reason. I sit at, every time I go, I sit at that table. I always have. I think you like human, you tend to sit in the same place, not for any reason, because you do. And you don't get things like that happening.
Yeah.
So what caused it? Why?
Well, speaking of Derby Jail, or Derby, the Derby Infirmary before they pulled it all down.
Oh, I love to go around that site. I know it. Yeah.
Just months before they pulled it down, they allowed a gathering of investigation groups to go around.
Wow.
I think that's my watch. Bedtime, it says. I think there was about 12 groups who went round. We were part of one group. There was the only place, excuse me, that had electricity generated in, and I say generated because there was no power in the building at that point. All they had was generators in various areas. Now, we were investigating, first of all, one of the wards. One by one, all the lights on the bed, the call buttons for nurses, we sat watching it. 1, 2, 3. I think there was 8 in the ward, so 4 either side, all came on. 1, 2, 3. That was one incident. On the same night, I said to one of the crew, I said, Gary, I'm going to sit in the, I don't know whether you call it plaster of Paris room or whatever, but they had a psychiatrist's bed or couch in the room. And I said, I'm going to sit on here for half an hour on my own and just see what happens. And 2 minutes after they'd all left the room, off they went, and I heard this gurney coming down the corridor.
Wow.
And so I'm on the radio and I said, Gary, enough, stop. And he said, why, what's wrong? I said, yeah, the gurney coming down the room. I said, you don't have to. I said, I get it, you're trying to frighten me up. I said, whatever. He said, Anton, mate, he says, I'm nowhere near you, we're the other side of the ward. I said, well, okay, someone is pushing a gurney, because I could hear the wheels. And I said, someone pushing a gurney down the corridor. Excuse me. He then said, give me a second. He radioed through, and the report was nobody else was in that area. I said, well, definitely hear a gurney.
Yeah.
I could then hear utensils like trays being banged and whatever. And I then said, Gary, you need to come and rescue me because I am going out of my mind here. I can hear all of this stuff going on. So Gary came down and 2 or 3 of the team came with him. And I said, right, okay, Gary, just so you know I'm not bluffing, you sit in this room for half an hour. You tell me what you can hear. If you hear nothing, that's fine. He then moved into the room.
That's brilliant.
After about 3 or 4 minutes, he said, yeah, all right, I get it, Anton. I get it. I said, what do you get? And he said, yeah, stop mucking around. I said, no, I'm not. I said, you're hearing what I'm hearing, aren't you? And he said, well, who's banging trays? I said, that's what I heard. So we went back into the room. We looked over it with a fine-tooth comb, hoping to see a small speaker hidden away somewhere that was playing this. We couldn't find anything. Our K2 was not picking anything up. There was nothing that would pick up any extraneous devices hanging around the room. Gary and I looked at each other and said, that was bizarre. And he says, if you heard what I heard, and I said, did you hear the gurney? He says, I didn't hear that. He said, I just heard trays clattering. I said, yeah, I heard the trays clattering. I heard the gurney coming down the corridor.
Wow.
We then moved on to
Can I just ask you a question? Was there actually a gurney in the corridor?
No, there was nothing.
No, it's just, fine. Yeah. It's all been emptied.
And that's why we were thinking there may be, little devices in the room that were playing out these sounds, because there was nothing evident, you know. But anyway, we then went into the children's ward, and the group split into 2. 4 of us went into an annex just off the children's ward, and myself, Gary, a medium, Jane Laffan. Have you ever come across Jane Laffan?
No, not yet.
Right. Jane Laffan, and I can't remember the other person. There was 4 of us in this group, and I noticed on a ledge a box containing keys. And I didn't think anything of it. But I know where all these keys were. And after a few minutes, we heard this small clatter on the floor. Shone our torches. There was a set of keys in the middle of the floor. So this is an apple. And Gary said to me, he says, "Did you have keys in your pocket?" No, of course I didn't. I said, "But I know where the keys were." "Where were they?" I said, "On that shelf over there." Impossible, because the keys would have had to have traveled 90 degrees. I don't know in physics even any object that can move around a corner 90 degrees.
Yeah, got you.
Can't do it.
Right.
So found the set of keys. And we were all arguing amongst ourselves and then saying, well, the other group must have thrown them. We radioed, the other group didn't even know what was going on. But you're still with an element of suspicion. You're saying, okay, are they playing dumb here? But again, I knew where the keys were, and I knew they would have had to have moved across the room, out of the room we were in. They would have had to have moved about 90 foot to the other part we were to get these keys, throw them out of the box, then move back to where they were. We didn't hear footsteps. We didn't hear anything, just the keys dropping on the floor.
You can hear everything. If somebody even slides their foot, you know, no matter what, you hear, because you're so sensitized to like listening, aren't you? So yeah, any movement you would hear. You know, you move your arms slightly, you'll hear the rustling. No, yeah.
So we put a bit of a white cross where the keys were, and we walked back. And Jane said, "Well, if spirit moved those keys, move them again." Whoosh. We thought, was that the keys moving? We walked back just a few more feet. The keys had moved about 1.5 feet off this white cross where the keys were. Now, if presupposing the 4 people in the other room with a closed door managed to creep across the floor without being noticed, pick up a set of keys, throw them 90 degrees around the corner onto the floor, then get back into their room without being heard or seen, how the hell did they manage to do the same thing again in the space of literally 5 or 6 feet?
Yeah.
How did they move these keys another 1.5 feet?
That's incredible. It really is.
No explanation.
Yeah.
So I would definitely say it's gone now, and it's such an unfortunate thing. Although they do link.
I'd love to see the pepper pots. They, you know, even when it was the DRI, they have always fascinated me, and they're still there. But
the new hospital, I think they said, has used parts of the old hospital. Right. And they suggest there's a black figure that haunts the corridors. Incredible. Now, I don't know that because I never went into the new building, but I did read an article a few years back which said, you know, ghosts of the DRI are now being visited upon the new Derby Hospital.
Yeah, which is quite a way out if it's the Royal Victoria. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's incredible.
So, I mean, you know, I believe. I'm probably the world's biggest skeptic, but I believe. And that doesn't...
That is right. I say I'm a skeptic, so I get where you're coming from.
I analyse...
question it, yeah.
Yeah. You know,
that's right.
We went on one investigation. God, what the famous authoress, Jane Austen.
Right, okay.
This is down in Hampshire. And it was Jane Austen's former residence. And half of it was falling down. They were restructuring it, and there was huge sheets of plastic film to stop anybody going into that section. Now, a dear friend of mine, very, very brave lad, I won't mention his name because probably I haven't spoken to him and said I'll mention your name. But anyway, call him Richard. Won't give the surname.
No.
He very kindly elected to go into a priest hole.
Wow.
The priest hole was a hole in the floor with a trapdoor over it. And it was about, let's say, 4 or 5 foot deep, enough to climb into and put the hatch down without anybody seeing. And I said, Richard, just, if you're happy with this, I'll give you a torch and a radio. And I said, just sit in this priest hole. Unfortunately, it had been used as a Halloween event months before, and they'd left a plastic skeleton in the bottom of it. And all I could hear was Richard cackling away, saying, "You wouldn't believe this," because I couldn't see, but he said, I was treading on something and I had to see what it was, and I shone the torch down, and it was this bloody skeleton. But I said, well, don't worry. I said, it's not the real dead. It's just,
Yeah.
And we went into a room, and there were other priest holes there as well, to hide people away. And I think there was about 12 of us all in this room. And I said, look, the first thing is if you hear a creak of the floorboards, or you hear you have to check absolutely everything to ascertain whether a creak on the floorboard is a genuine creak on the floorboard, or just, you're moving slightly and it might be a twitch of a nerve in the leg, but it may sound like it's under your feet, but it's 20 foot away, it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
You have to look at it as a group of things going on, not just one thing.
Correct.
Then we get a call from Richard on the radio, and he says, guys, are you moving about? I said, no, we're in a room about 2 corridors along and 1 floor down. Okay, well, who's moving about on my floor? I said, I've no idea. What are you hearing? He said, I'm hearing the floorboards creaking. And I said, okay, you're down in this pit. Is it possible that you're cold and you're shaking and what have you, and it's manifesting through the floor, up through the walls of this priest hole into the floorboard above? No, he says, no. He said, this is someone walking around with boots on.
Wow.
Okay. So another situation where you eliminate as much as you possibly can before you say, yes, that's something I have. I always say, and I think I said this earlier, I always say, I'm not going to commit 100% and say this was it.
Yeah, that's right.
What I will say is I don't have any answers yet.
Yeah, that's what I do as well. But what I want to do is thank you so much. The time has gone really quickly, and you have to get to bed because it's what time is it there?
I think it's 9:30. Yeah, just about 9:30.
Yeah, but you've got things to do and things. But thank you so much. I do want to speak to you again. It's been incredibly interesting, and there's so much to hear about.
Honestly, I've got loads of stories, and I'm more than happy to tell them. And I'll maybe give you a plug. I hope for the next fortnight, I have a book called The Ghosts of War, which is being released on Amazon, hopefully the end of this month, August.
Okay.
And it is, in the past, I've written 2 books for children, and there's a series of, historical adventures to help children learn about history. It features a ghost who lives in the attic, and he takes the children on these adventures. So Nathaniel Piber's stories, they're already out on Amazon, but The Ghosts of War is more a mature audience book. And it is basically an eye-in-the-sky traffic reporter who starts seeing strange anomalies happening.
Wow.
And time slips, and hence
lovely.
War. So he has to try and reconcile himself. He has a professor of paranormal studies from Liverpool Hope University, who comes down to work with him, and the stories develop. Excuse me. Each there is, so chapter 1, chapter 3, chapter 5 is all about the reporter, and chapter 2, chapter 4, chapter 6, chapter 8, they are individual references to the Second World War, things that happened, physically happened, that might explain what the reporter is seeing in his world. So if we're happy to do this again, I'm more than happy to talk a little bit more about that and plug that.
Thank you. Yeah, I would love to speak to you again and certainly arrange something. But thank you so much for your time and what incredible stories. And I love the way you investigate. But take care and thanks everyone for watching and goodbye.
Good night.
Bye.